You can think it, but don't say it. Don't do it. Okay? Because then you get up with, and here's my question. This guy, this lieutenant now from ISP is now the case agent. He's the lead investigator after the murder or after the adjudication here. Have you guys noticed that real fast? It went from Payne to now this guy. And listen how he answers the questions.
Did numerous devices, but you collected an active phone that he had. What did you find on that phone?
Well, the phone, it just provided us and matched up everything that we mostly already had, you know.
The phone provided us, matched up with mostly everything we had. Here's the key word, mostly, which I don't even know if that's a word. Okay. Mostly what we already have. Okay. Well, what do you already have? In the Celebrite dump report, which we have not seen. They've not released the Celebrite report. If you look at the Stephen Stearns case and the Sunshine Laws in Florida, they released that report. Is Moscow going to release this report? Is my question. And if so, we're mostly going to see the pictures of that Dateline had about Ted Bundy and about all of this, about all of those things. But you see, it could potentially go against the narrative of we don't know what the motive is. We don't, apparently they didn't have a working theory. And my question is, then why did you bring in the behavior science unit? Why did the FBI's BAU guys show up, walk around the house, go upstairs, look out the window to see the view the suspect could have seen and create up a psychological profile for you of the type of offender you would want to be looking for? Kind of like we did with Greg Cooper, Dr. Bricado, Ann Burgess, Dean, myself, others. They used to run the behavior science unit. Greg Cooper ran the behavior science unit. Is Santa Claus telling Greg Cooper and experts like him they don't know what they're talking about? Is that what the messaging is here? Or is that a talking point from the university and now the state police, who right now it says lead investigator on the Kohberger case?
Yeah, talk about rewriting history. No, he wasn't. We have all the documents. We have the arrest warrant affidavit. We've got so much that had Corporal Payne on it. But now, days later, all of a sudden, it's a little more convenient for this guy to be the lead. Chris, I would just remind everybody watching this. So this reporter, the reporter from that piece, is asking him specifically about the phone and what was on the phone. And just maybe putting a bow on this, the reason it was so important is because Dateline showed photos from his phone that were leaked. This is before the plea deal. And this was so impactful. You guys remember Judge Hippler said, there's been a leak in this case. I'm going to do an investigation. This could potentially hurt our jury pool. This is serious stuff. Okay. If the Dateline piece was fabricated, if it wasn't true, if they made it up, you would have never seen that reaction from Judge Hippler. So, to Chris's point, whatever was on the phone, but some of it was, and we know, because if none of it was truthful, the judge would have never said, I'm going to do an investigation on the leak. Okay, so now, after the fact, the reporter's asking the Idaho State Police, because the lead investigator, Corporal Payne, is in the wind now. He's gone. Tell us about the phone. Tell us about what was on the phone. And this guy isn't saying nothing. And he's not being honest. Actually, a more honest answer would have been, look, I don't want to talk about the evidence. I don't want to talk about what was on the phone, and then state your reason why. But this guy is just word salad. He looks nervous. He looks a little uncomfortable with the question. And the reporter, to her credit, is like, well, just tell us. She's pressing him, not as hard as I would have pressed him, but she's still trying to do her job. And we're not getting a satisfactory answer from the lead prosecutor. And so you guys are seeing it and smelling it yourself. May come to your own conclusion.
I'm going to go with, they have a wall of attorneys. They vetted their source and they said, run, put it on national TV. Because if it wasn't true, i.e. the photographs on his phone, okay, they could have been sued from one end of the country to the next end.
Yeah, you're talking about Dateline.
Dateline. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So they're solid in what information was provided to them. My feeling was whoever that source is got under the saddle of the judge and he wanted to find out who that person was, because he basically almost stopped the trial.
That's right. He delayed it, actually.
Yep.
He actually partly delayed it, not just because defense had asked, but because he was doing some leak investigation that I was on record to say, you're never going to find the leak and this is going to go nowhere.
Exactly,
Which
Karen. Exactly.
I've seen these for 35 years.
You called it.
Not the first time I've seen that.
So now what this is damage control. Okay.
Exactly.
What, to your point, what he should have said was, what's on the phone or whatever. What he should have said was, there was a lot of inappropriate material on Kohberger's phone, because at some point, somebody is going to get that information. And it's going to be, one of the major news networks, CNN, News Nation, Fox, just keep naming them all. Okay? Somebody's going to get that information. Okay? And when it comes out, I think the university is hoping there's enough time between it so that everybody goes, oh, see, I knew it. Told you. There it was. Pictures of Bundy on the phone. Look at him dressing up like Bundy, just like Dateline showed. But they're hoping that the news cycle drops down, okay, and it just kind of goes away right now. That's the reason I'm doing this program today. Because YouTube is forever. And as long as you're in the guidelines, it stays with us forever. So let's reveal, you reached out to the Washington State University for some documents, right, Karen?
I sure did.
Under a FOIA.
Under a FOIA. Yep.
And what did they tell you?
So I received an email back saying that Washington State University Police would get back to me in April 2026 or later if they need more time. What? So obviously I went and looked up the law, Washington State FOIA law, and it's left open. There's no number of days that a government agency has to respond, but it is, quote, a reasonable time. Okay. So obviously they're playing hardball. They're not going to release whatever unless I want to come back and sue them. If I want to, hire an attorney and take them on with this. So yeah, April 2026, Kat, if you can believe that. It's outrageous. Okay. And, we're the little guys here. We're not with the big major networks. We don't have a wall of attorneys to, fight this. So, they're doing it because they can. And I think eventually some of the big guys, the larger media networks will, I'm surprised that they haven't already. They may be in the process of doing it. Washington State Police, if you recall, did release some body cam footage of the officers executing the search warrant at BK's apartment, but we didn't see inside the apartment. We didn't see more details. We didn't get any of that stuff. Yeah, exactly. What are they hiding, right? On a case that's already adjudicated, that Washington State University they're not even a main player. Yeah, obviously, they had a role. They worked with Moscow PD and I'm sure Idaho State Police and the FBI. And while
I
we're
think they're
talking
on
about
it.
what's
The
that?
larger media's on it. Domestic.
Okay,
I think they would
well,
be. Yeah.
obviously, in addition to Moscow PD and Latah County Sheriff's Office, and of course the Latah County Prosecutor's Office, Washington State University they do hold some records that we want to get. And anyway, for a second I lost my train of thought there, and the other point I was going to make about Washington State University and what they have. But yeah, the fact that they are, and now a FOIA is for the public too. You don't just have to have a YouTube channel or have been a journalist to get this. I mean, the whole point about Freedom of Information Act request is for the public to be able to see what their government is doing. That's kind of the bottom line. That's always been the driving force for me. That's why I loved my journalism career and I still enjoy doing it. And I believe the public has a right to know what is going on. And in a case like this, listen, as Bill Thompson said, the guy's in prison and will die there. Okay, great. Now open the books. Let us see. But most importantly, let's let the victim families, have their questions answered and addressed first, and then the media. So, Chris, what say you?
Let's give page 354 out of the handbook, because this is a handbook, by the way, on how to handle this. Okay. So here's what Scott Green says on page 354. Moscow, Idaho suddenly became known internationally as media from all over the world converged on the small town, which was unprepared for the ways and tactics of big city reporters. You mean the press, like the First Amendment? Is that what you mean? I mean, I'm confused what a big city reporter is versus a small city reporter right there operating under the same rules of the First Amendment and their ethical journalistic responsibilities. Big city reporters, mostly ethical, some not. Yeah, they try to get the story. You may not agree with how they do it. The teams worked to get MPD, Moscow Police Department, the information needed to conduct the investigation, prepared talking points for press conferences, and responding to media requests for information and interviews with university personnel in limited cases. So basically what the university did, everybody, is they controlled the flow of information. They controlled the flow of information, and they could have meant YouTubers. Yeah, freedom of the press. That's correct. I operate under the First Amendment like everybody else.
Chris, I was thinking back to some of the press releases we got
They could
in
have meant
those
the mailman. Go ahead.
in the early days.
Yeah, go ahead.
And they were the most ridiculously written press releases I've ever seen in all my years, because the university was trying so hard to control what was out there. And remember, you guys, before BK was arrested, there was so much speculation on social media. People threw Kaylee's boyfriend under the bus, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to go back and rehash that, but they would have on their press releases a title called, they would say absolutely nothing new. And then they had a thing called damage control or something to that effect. And then they recited the false information that they grabbed from social media. And then they said, well, none of this is true. Okay. You don't, PR 101, you don't do that. You ignore it. Okay. And this is before the gag order was in place. And I remember though we should go back and get those. In fact, I think we're going to do that at some point. The media on-camera interviews that the university did was a joke. They answered nothing. They didn't know. And again, this is before the murderer was arrested. But to your point, they're controlling the narrative. They did a lousy job of it because it was a joke. It looked like just amateur hour, and it actually has the reverse effect in the long run. It makes everybody think, what are you hiding? What are you trying to suppress? Butt out. This is a police investigation. Stay in your lane. We got this. So I think this stuff backfires at the end of the day.
It does, because it backfires in relationship to Homicide 101. Okay. The types of evidence that's being collected, is it the type of things that, are they doing it just right? Because there's a digital footprint here, phone records, surveillance footage, all of these types of things were collected, but there are protocols for this stuff. Okay. And when you just point out in the very first document that they use the exit door for the cops and the DA, by the way, who should have known better from the get-go, okay, that they're coming in through, the same door the suspect exited, okay, that is not proper protocol for anything. I don't know where they learned that, but they didn't learn it in the police academy. Suspect interviews, you need to capture them. Open-ended question, it avoids bias. I'm going to go over the statement soon. And problems there. Employ trained interviewers to detect deception, etc. Roles of the forensic. This is Homicide 101. These are basic things. Reporting, detailed forensic reports for this case. Where are those reports? I hope they're released soon, because there are stuff. We don't need to see the autopsy reports or the crime scene photos. I get them, trying to seal that stuff, no problem. But the reports should be put into the public arena, because the reason if you don't put them into the public arena, what you end up with is a report like this.
I was waiting for you to get to the glove, Chris.
This is the glove. So tell the story about the glove, Karen.
Okay. If you're new here, if you haven't seen our past videos on this, Chris and I went to the crime scene at 1122 King Road on November 24th, 2022, which was how many days out? About 11 days after the murders. Okay. And when we were walking around on the sidewalk and on the public street, up and down King Road and around the house and filming it, and you can go back and look at our videos, Chris noticed while he was standing on the sidewalk looking into the crime scene, which anybody could have done, driving by, walking by. I mean, national media set up their cameras and stuff right there. You look in to where the trash cans were towards the front of the house, and he saw a black glove on the ground. He called me over and he said, "Hey, come look at this." And he said, "What does that look like to you?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, that looks like a black glove." Now, there was a little bit of snow, melting snow on top, and some leaves and some dirt, but you could clearly see it was a glove. Okay. So then, Chris, tell them what you did.
Well, it's the infamous glove. So I waved over the investigator or the cop that was on the scene, and he came over and said, "Oh, wow, That was almost verbatim. And I said, yeah. I said, hey, I'm a retired, homicide guy here. I'm out working on something else. And by the way, I was working on the Michael Vaughn case.
Okay, well, let's stay focused on
Yeah,
the glove.
I'm going to stay focused. Okay.
Stay on the glove.
And I said, you guys probably want to collect that. And he said, yeah. He didn't say, what's your name, where are you from, etc. Give me your date of birth, give me your phone number, nothing. He didn't ask any of that. And I figured, okay, that was awkward. And I said, do you want my number? And he goes, no, I'm good. I'm good. And I didn't want to argue with the guy because obviously he knew it, he sat on the stand with Ann Taylor before and others. So he knew more than me. And I wasn't going to argue with him. What's the old saying? You birth the baby, you get to rock it. Okay. So now the infamous report comes out.
Well, wait, we also saw, we were still standing out there and it looked like he had a conversation with either another officer or somebody else. And I didn't see him collect it, but so this on-scene officer was made aware of it. And then obviously when we were gone, they collected it.
Yeah. And so they told me they were going to collect it. Remember, honey? They said, yeah, we're going to get it. Don't worry. And I said, okay, fine. All right. So now we go to the report.
This is the first we've heard anything about that glove for 2.5 years. And we often wondered, we were like, I wonder if they knew whose glove it was. Did they test it for DNA? Is it a piece of evidence? Whatever became of it. Okay.
So Corporal Payne, who's the lead investigator at that time, now it's this new guy from ISP based on the news. He writes this narrative. And by the way, we would call this a 153. It's an officer's report. Okay. And it just basically tucks into the case file, said we did it, is basically what it is. Okay. On November 24th, 2022, I collected a black Polar Penguin glove from the parking lot of 1122 King Road. I conducted a subsequent investigation by watching the body-worn camera of Officer Nunes, the first MPD officer on scene, and looked over the scene photos taken by ISP forensic team. None of these sources showed the glove was present upon the officer's initial response to the scene or during the processing of the scene on November 13, 2022. It is unclear where the glove came from at the time of this writing. Okay, so basically he says, I went and I looked at the body-worn cameras of the officers who responded and the photographs taken on the 13th, and it doesn't appear that that glove is there. That's the inference, okay? Well, what he didn't anticipate was I did my own homework. And I went to open source and I saw this from November 14th, the day after the murder, and I found the glove.
Yeah,
So
you can clearly see it. You can clearly see it in that picture.
Between the 13th and the 14th, according to Detective Payne, Corporal Payne, somebody put a glove there. There it is on Fox News on November 14th. This showed me even further what lack of experience can do to a case. Because he's having the world believe that this is the truth, when in fact, this is the truth. This is tunnel vision in an inexperienced investigative team. And it is not, hey, look at me, it's not about me. It's about the 4 victims in that house. And now I want to hear how he positions himself in public and the lieutenant about whether this was a mistake or not. It's on the other side of their yellow tape, just like the photographs we took that day of the glove. Would everybody like to see those photographs? I thought
Sure,
you
if you have them.
would. It's gonna take me a second, and I'm gonna pull them up. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I read that in the report, I was like, wow, you know, only because we were there November 24th, and that was the glove Chris found. And it's just so misleading. And obviously, the natural reaction is, what else are they not being fully transparent about? Yeah, it is a lack of experience, as Chris said.
And I'm not criticizing them for having lack of experience. I'm criticizing them for the. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I mean, you can have no experience, but just be truthful in what you do.
That's it.
Yeah. And Sherry asks, I'll put her question up. What about testing it for DNA? Exactly. That's what we were hoping they were going to do. Obviously, they never did it. They never, now they knew it was a polar, what was it? A Penguin Polar or Polaris
Something.
brand, whatever. Yeah, we have to assume they never tested it for DNA because there was no reference to that in his one paragraph report. So yeah, it was extremely disappointing to see that in a report, to see how they handled that, right? And I got to be honest, when Chris pointed that out when we were there, man, I just had this really bad sinking feeling inside. I thought, dang, how did they miss that? And what else, you
Sure
know?
did.
Yeah.
And
Now,
notice
do you have the picture? We also have another picture near the trash cans, so you can see. It's the same side that we saw on the Fox News picture.
and that's this one right here.
Yeah,
Right
that's
back
it.
there.
Yep.
And you can
Exactly.
clearly see it sitting there on Fox News on the 13th. So the only thing that changed was they left it there and it got snowed on.
Mm-hmm.
And all I was doing was pointing it out to them, saying, hey guys, you probably want to collect that. And obviously they didn't, because on the 14th, the news saw it, right? The news saw it. They put it up. That's my arrow. I put that arrow there. Okay. But the day after the murders, the news saw that. Okay. But if that's the 14th, 10 days later, that glove is still sitting there when I showed up and said, guys, that looks like a glove. Remember, Karen, when we were walking up the street and I said, honey, that's a glove.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you never want to see, a glove on the ground inside their crime scene, just left there, knowing what such a heinous, horrific crime this was, involving 4 beautiful students whose lives were taken. This is
And then the next thing,
outside of the house.
yeah, and the next thing I pointed out to them, whether they wanted it or not, was, hey guys, the cars need to be towed and get into a secure environment so you can process them correctly. But you know what it came down to, unfortunately, was, this idea that, what we should do? Now, we should go meet with the university staff and let them know.
Well,
We should
and Chris,
go sit down with the president. Go ahead.
Yeah. And Caroline makes a great point. And the jacket, remember the black jacket that we saw the officers outside of the house? They pick it up, look at it, and drop it. And also now we know that there was a black backpack left outside of or found outside of the house.
Yeah.
But why can't we just have an answer saying, look, we tested the backpack. It's from him or it's not from him. Okay. Why can't we have straightforward answers on this stuff to make it go away? Tell us and we won't keep bringing it up as a point. And there's so much of that in this case, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, Homicide 101, they probably would have been hammered on numerous things.